Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Ultimate General American Revolution. A game that I was looking forward to for a very long time, quite a few years, ever since the release of Ultimate General Civil War. So I played Gettysburg when it came out, I played Civil War when it came out, I played Age of Sail. Out of those three games, I really disliked Age of Sail, which is unfortunate when I'm thinking about American Revolution because I think like it's based on the principles of Age of Sail. I mean, Age of Sail in terms of like, individual battles was fine, but in terms of campaign difficulty dynamics, it was pretty awful. Unfortunately, that has been inherited by this game. And it is not a good campaign dynamic. Some people will defend this. Frankly, I'm not even going to get into the details. It's just really badly designed in many ways. But what's the problem? Especially in this game, you might ask, because there are going to be quite a lot of issues that you're going to be dealing with as a player in this particular campaign. They're going to lead to a kind of campaign dynamic that's you're either dominating this campaign map or you're getting obliterated. There's no middle ground, which is a bit of a problem that this series has had in general. And honestly, Total War has as well. Like in Total War, you're either dominating the campaign or you're losing. That's kind of a bit of a problem in general because this game series is built on the principles of Total War. Regardless, though, what are the problems? What's so awful about starting a campaign over here on any difficulty? It doesn't matter if we're talking easy, normal. And I get annoyed when developers like think that we can make things easier or better in a campaign for people on lower difficulties if we just give them more money, more recruits, or we lower the number of enemy troops. That doesn't necessarily make a campaign better. Or it doesn't necessarily fix anything. So yeah, the AI does this is a normal campaign, so the AI has less troops than it would have on the highest difficulty. But that ain't the problem, suffice to say. That ain't the problem. So what's the problem, exactly? Well, when you begin the campaign, the only thing you will be able to recruit is a militia regiment. Infantry regiments will come later. How much later, that depends on you, but let me explain what the problem is. So, your basic unit in a campaign is going to be a militia unit. A militia unit has 8.5 firearms, 8.3 reload, and they buffed it in the most recent patch, so just going to point this out. This is in reaction to that patch. It does have more models per unit, but when you're looking at the stats of these units, obviously they're not necessarily the best, because if we compare them to an infantry regiment, a fusilier, 10 melee, 10 firearms, 10 reload. And the same principle applies to the British units. But that's not all. If that was just it, if we were in a situation where, okay, I have units with fewer models, but they with more models, but they have worse stats, that would be one thing. But that's only part of the equation. Oh yes, only part, because then we have to understand this. Each regiment has a commanding officer. Each regiment is made up of companies, up to 4 companies for a militia regiment, up to 6 for a regular regiment. This, by the way, is going to count quite a bit early on in a campaign. Not so much later on, but early on it's going to count because you're going to need more militia regiments to match the numbers the British have. Because you can't just match them regiment for regiment. They have 6 units per regiment. They start with 6 units per regiment. You can only get up to 4, so you're going to need more regiments, which means you need more commanding officers. Because if you don't have a commanding officer, you can't create a regiment. This is a big problem because officers to command regiments are a significant issue at the beginning of the campaign. But the problem is each unit requires a gun. Well, the issue is the British don't just have you start with civilian muskets. This is a civilian musket. 8 efficiency, 65 reload, or rather really just the stats over here that you can see right there. The British, however, have the Brown Bess. You look at the Brown Bess. You see the Brown Bess's capability, right? That you do have. So 10 efficiency versus 8. Reload capability. So it's just a better gun in every way that counts. And it's significantly better because it does have that bayonet in melee. So you already have a slight benefit, though it's certainly far more significant when you get into a battle, but you have a benefit for the British in terms of the types of units they have, because what the British will do is they'll start a campaign, they'll have about 5,000 units in Boston. This will be shortly reinforced to about 6,000, no problem. In total, actually, they'll have over 7,000 very early on. All of those units in Boston are going to have brown besses. All of them are going to be line infantry. They're even going to have cavalry units. You don't even have cavalry units in the campaign at the beginning, and it takes a while to get them. And that's where we really get into the issues here. It's not just one particular aspect around it. It's a culmination of events that leads to a really crappy early game that defines this campaign and makes it far less enjoyable than it should. It's not about tactics, strategy, and all of that. It's about abusing the hell out of the game, because if you don't, you're going to lose. This is something that dragged down Total War for many years, and it's actually one of the things that Creative Assembly improved in Warhammer 3. I guess we are really living in days of this game be emulating Total War, for better or for worse. But the problem is this. You do start with 2 regular infantry regiments, and you can put up to 6 units of Fusiliers in them. You can't put artillery in them from the very beginning of a campaign, because you don't have the ability of creating infantry regiments from the beginning. Even if you did have the ability, you don't have the gun production for them. So let's consider this situation. There's about 7,000 British troops. You start with about 2,500. So yeah, you're outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Maybe even closer to 3 to 1 in a campaign. That's the beginning of the campaign. It's not the situation overall. Like over here, one of the things you can do in this game is spend a lot of money on intelligence. By the way, this will bankrupt you, so don't do it. But over here, you can see there's easily like 4,000 British troops in this area. There's the almost 7,000 or so. So remember, you start with about like 2,500, 3,000, let's say. Okay, 3,000. 3,000 versus 11,000, maybe even 12,000 within the first few months of the campaign. You're starting and yes, they are better troops, better equipped, with more units, with more guns, with more artillery than you. Because that's another thing that the British will have. Every regiment they have in these forts over here, Saratoga, Ticonderoga, Frederick, Boston, etc., will have artillery in them. They'll have skirmishers in them. They'll have cavalry. They'll have an entire regiment of cavalry in Boston, beyond the fact they have general. And the only thing that prevents you from being wiped out is the fact that the AI is just like hard-coded to not move from Boston. By the way, that's not what happened historically. The British didn't move out of Boston not because they were crazy or sitting on their asses, because, yeah, they were actually in a very hostile territory where a lot of people hated them. So them sitting on their ass in Boston, well, they were not really in a position to do anything other than that and build up strength to eventually do so. Which is what happened in New York, exactly, after they abandoned Boston. But the developers seem tied to this idea. But the problem is these troops are not exactly passive, and there's naval invasion is happening where the British get, let's say, 1,000 troops, less than 1,000 troops, or they get an entire regiment that's going to march here. So you can't just ignore the situation. If you take all, like for instance, I have, besides this regiment over here in Leicester that I was building up, beyond that regiment, you have to devote significant resources to keeping this contained. Like over here, easily 1,500 men out of the ones that I have. Let's say I have maybe 5,000 men at this point, and getting 5,000 men is not going to happen easily. I want to point that out. Nor are you going to be able to use all those men on one side. So you're significantly outnumbered. Historically speaking, the Patriots have vastly outnumbered the British in Boston. Just Boston alone. If you think about Ticonderoga, how many people were defending these forts historically, yeah, there were not that many. So you have a situation where every single advantage in a campaign early on is towards the British. And it's, from my perspective, that when the British campaign is released, I'm going to say it out loud. If the British campaign were to be released in the state, you would just obliterate everything in your path. Like, give me 7,000 men. Hell, give me even 1,000 men. I'd win battles of annihilation against the Patriots, and the only thing I think would stop you in a British campaign would just be the loyalties of a particular region. But again, that is not necessarily going to be, but it's not necessarily going to be the issue of just like one thing. It's the issue of the entire picture. So you start outnumbered, you start outgunned. The enemy has crucially more variety than you. They have more troops than you. They have better troops than you. In every single way, you are at a disadvantage. Now, I am sure some developer that's making this game is thinking there, well, you just build it up. That's cute. Yeah, let's just sit on our ass and build it up. Historically, you can say that. That's not exactly how the Siege of Boston unfolded, by the way. It's like the Patriots fought tooth and nail to actually starve the British out or force them out of Boston. They didn't launch a direct assault on the city, not because they wouldn't have won, but because they were not willing to pay the price for such a victory. But again, they could have done it. But here's your problem. You can't win a fight over here. Not against these troops. Even if you were to have, let's say, 6,000, 7,000 troops, you launch a direct assault over here because of the fact they have more artillery than you. Those artillery guns, and you can't match their artillery production. Even if you were to devote every single resource in terms of producing artillery guns, the basic ones you have, and I'm pretty damn certain they have better than basic guns. Actually, I know for certain that they have better than these 3-pounders. Even if you were to devote every resource towards gun production, to produce civilian muskets, to equip 6,000 troops, to produce enough artillery to match their numbers, they're still going to have the cavalry advantage. They're still going to have the unit variety advantage because, remember, they have skirmishers as well, regular skirmishers. It's not like they just outnumber you. No, it's like fighting an endgame crisis over here from turn 1. The equivalent I could give you, imagine dealing with Grimoire in Total War Warhammer 3, imagine dealing with Grimgor if he could recruit Black Orcs from turn 1 and you're dealing with him as, I don't know, the Empire, as Karl Franz. That's kind of the dynamic you're dealing with here. Like, yeah, anyone who's played Warhammer 3 would understand how lopsided that matchup would be. I'm probably exaggerating to some extent, but that's how it feels like. Because the British have all the unit variety, and yes, that matters. Cavalry gives you flexibility. Artillery gives you flexibility. Skirmishers give you flexibility. You don't have cavalry. Minutemen are nowhere near as good as British skirmishers. Your line infantry is nowhere near as good. Even the units that have the exact same stats, your own line infantry versus their line infantry, even your own line infantry are not going to match them because they just have lesser guns. And they're going to do worse in melee, far worse in melee. And that's a particular problem in this game. Especially because that melee situation is a significant issue. Why is that? Well, you can't win an engagement from ranged. The reason you can't win an engagement from ranged is you will take significant casualties from that. Like, if you're trying to win a ranged fight against an enemy that has a vast artillery advantage versus you, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be torn to shreds. You try and recruit artillery to match them, you won't have the quality or the quantity of guns to match them. That's the problem. So one of the strategies that you don't have that you could use is to win in melee. And not in the sense your entire army is engaging against the enemy in melee. No, that's a good way of committing suicide. Instead, and I'll probably just demonstrate it over here, instead the best thing you can do is find an isolated portion of the enemy army and try and engage that in melee. But here's the problem with that particular strategy. Now, the problem with that particular strategy is if you try and engage one-on-one in melee, because you don't have bayonets and they do, you will flat out end up losing. Okay, you might say fair enough, they do have they do have that melee stats advantage. But one of the things you could do, and this is what worked when the game originally came out, one of the things you could do, and you might say it's reasonable enough to do it, is to take 2, 3, 4 units and on a section of the battlefield through maneuver warfare, isolate one enemy unit and win that way. That's how you did it that's how it worked when the game came out. Now, doing that was kind of silly, really, because you're just abusing AI behavior to make them waste time on a certain flank. Even here, like, where they're passive in a fort, guess what? The same strategy that works in Total War, where it's like you just find a section of the battlefield find the section of a fort where the AI is just where the AI just doesn't have troops. You advance through there, and you get on the walls. Once you get on the walls, once you find your position on the walls, that's gonna be GG for the AI, more or less. That's how sieges work. Yeah, this game is really copying Total War in the worst ways possible in this respect. But that idea of taking a significant number of units and just a significant number of units and getting a local advantage, a massive local advantage against the enemy. Yeah, you know what they did? They nerfed that. They didn't fix the balance of units until very recently, and even then it's still not fixed. No, what they did was they nerfed that specifically. So now when you blob up units in melee, it will flatten out work as well. I mean, it still gives you some advantage, but like even on an open field battle, trying to do something like this will just get a lot of your guys killed. So the one strategy you have that could work, that could help you achieve success over here, is a surefire way of getting a lot of your guys killed. They also made it, okay, fair enough, the defender has a significant advantage, but I got in the fort. We're on the even field over here. You try and assault in melee here, even with like regular line infantry, you're just gonna end up losing a significant number of men in the process. Don't even get me started on the melee ability of the freaking artillery. Why exactly artillery are capable of fighting in melee far better than anyone else is absurd. Like, you know, I understand like charging on artillery is a painful experience already because, you know, canister shot and all that. But like just the dynamic here, like this one I'm gonna win because overall I did flank them out, got them out of position, then they moved over there to counter me. That's the only reason I'm gonna move, but win this one. So I'm still abusing the AI. Now this works as long as the AI doesn't have enough men to defend all the positions of the fort. It's a tricky, and yeah, the AI is just like spazzing out completely and just an utterly silly and broken system. It is. It is completely and utterly broken. What the hell is this? Like, this feels like really broken. The point is, you end up with this awful campaign gameplay. Like, the melee and balance, the fact that you want to use melee because, yeah, you will lose a range firefight if you get involved in a prolonged one. Unless you, like, to win against an enemy that has an artillery advantage in range combat, yeah, that's tricky. I mean, this is far worse. Like the Confederate campaign, I was thinking back like the Civil War campaigns, Confederates versus Union. Confederate had better melee capability, but had lesser guns, right? They had better training, they had more veteran troops. The British have every single advantage. How the hell do you design a game thinking that's gonna be great? Oh, you can build that up as the Americans, and that's what they did historically. Yeah, let me just say this about the historic battlefield prowess of the British. They got their ass handed to them in the vast majority of battles where they fought on even numbers. With the exception of like a few battles like Camden, and Camden is the only major battle where the British won despite being significantly outnumbered in the entire war. The only major one, at least. And yeah, I did win here. Congrats. I lost half my army for this. I now have to recuperate. It's not even the number of... by the way, I'll talk about something that's quite silly from my perspective as well. You don't care about the number of units you lose. Like, the actual number... Like, you could lose your entire army as long as the units stay alive. That's not really irrelevant, surprisingly. Now, sure, I could have waited for my artillery to do its work over here, but remember, British have better guns. And surprisingly, guns in a fort are actually going to do quite well. Do you know how Ticonderoga was taken historically? Maybe you could talk about Benedict Arnold and how he did it, because I would really love to replicate the way he did it, historically speaking, as opposed to the slaughter fest that always awaits me in every single fort battle. Because, yeah, Americans and British did not march to their demise in fort battles, historically speaking. Siege battles, this myth that exists about history. Yeah. That exists about these kind of battles. But while things may seem more reasonable in range, they're not because of the artillery situation and melee. Yeah, the British just have a flat-out advantage, and they have more troops than you. They will get more troops than you. They have basically Dyson spheres producing unlimited resources in the campaign, so they're not concerned at all about the number of men they're actually losing. You, however, well, you also don't care about the number of troops you may be losing. That's actually not the limiting factor. Okay, won it. And actually, this is not too bad of a ratio to 1. That was awful. I'm ashamed to have fought that battle. Oh, but here's the brilliant thing. You don't actually give a damn about the casualties taken there. Like, no, seriously. I'm not joking. The main limiting factor in your campaign, beyond the guns, okay, so losing men is losing guns, so losing... so guns are more valuable than lives. Yeah, I'm sure if Washington was playing the war like that, he would have been kicked out of office, and rightly so. But the issue is that you need the resource. You have an officer resource. As you might notice, is 0 right here. The reason is every regiment has a commanding officer, and every company has a commanding officer. The low ranks of officers will get depleted severely during the course of every single battle. It's like, so basically we're talking about lieutenants, all that kind of stuff, right? In a campaign. Oh, I got 2 ships over here. Whatever shall I do with these ships? Yeah, it's like useless. Useless, utterly useless. Can I disband these? Just really, they're that useless. They're not adding anything. Well, naval combat is just an utter mess. It's like it's not worth engaging in it unless you're willing to cheese the hell out of every system in the game for the sake of victory. But the problem is, as stated, you need low-ranking officers for each company. You lose a lot of them, so the main limiting factor ends up being your officers' resources. And this is a problem early on, because later on you're going to be doing a lot of this. You're going to go, and you should probably do this from the very beginning of your campaign, by the way, is just like go in every settlement that's worth anything and just produce horses, produce officers, and materials, textiles, all that. But really, produce officers, because that's going to be the main limiting factor that you're going to be dealing with during the course of a campaign. And once you have enough officers, congrats. That's really the main bottleneck. That and guns, but you can pick up guns from the enemy. Though, funnily enough, they were annoyed that people were not producing guns. Well, of course we're not going to produce guns. The enemy was giving, like, you've created the campaign dynamic, and the reason they did this is actually tied to another system that they've had in the series from Civil War, basically. Oh, but people were not producing guns, so we're just going to severely limit post-battle loot. So all those major battles that you'd fight involving thousands and thousands of troops, and by the way, you kill thousands of troops, you reduce the British troops to 0, they'll just send 3,000, 4,000 more troops via the sea anyway, so meaningless. But what was happening, and still worth doing it, by the way. Like, despite some of the nerfs with this, they nerfed what you would call post-battle loot. So there's after every battle, you can get guns, artillery, all that dropped on the ground for you and the enemy. So what they did is they severely nerfed this. And then they buffed it for lower difficulties, because of course they did for lower difficulties. It's like they seem to think that playing on the highest difficulties is about just making it the pain train. No, it's not. Like, maybe that's just my personal perspective on that. It shouldn't be, but in this game it is. Regardless, that design of difficulty aside, that horrible design of difficulty aside, what they ended up doing, in a campaign over here, they nerfed the post-battle loot. And that's not to say playing passively is worth it. It is not. It's still very much encouraged to play very, very aggressively during the course of a campaign. Playing passively is just a surefire way to lose. It boils down to this. For you to match the British, and you can, in terms of production, in terms of anything, you first need to unlock it via research. Yes, this has one of the worst research ideas of a game. So, you first have to research everything, because apparently the Americans don't know how to produce anything until you spend months researching it. So, you need to go and waste months, and yes, I do mean months, in terms of, oh, you want to unlock Benedict Arnold, you need to research him. It takes 52 days. You want to get Dragoons, it takes 84 days. This is such a stupid system. Like, if it was a system tied to, like, hey, you need to produce certain buildings and then you can unlock them, yeah, sure, fair enough. But no, you need to research. It takes 3 months, let's say, for the Continental Army, closer to 4. It takes 3 months for the Dragoons alone. You want Grenadiers, all that. It's months and months and months and months and months. That is a silly, ridiculous system. And the reason it's silly and ridiculous is the way you actually overcome the limitation of time. Because if you think you've got that kind of time to unlock things like the Fusilier and Artillery Company to reach parity with the enemy, or to get the college for better officers, or to get better rifles or better artilleries, no, you don't have that time. So you can't even produce this. Like, they nerfed post-battle loot, but the reason post-battle loot was so important is we can't produce anything that's worth a damn. Like the civilian muskets, yeah, they're not worth a damn. We don't have enough officers to have a vast army. We can't zerg the enemy with a vast army because we don't have enough officers to equip them. And hell, we can't even pay them even if we did, because, yeah, upkeep is going to cost us an arm and a leg. So that doesn't work. You can't produce high-quality guns, not because you don't have the resources for it, but because you don't have the freaking research, and the research takes months and months on end. It's like, you have a game that's extremely punishing towards you from the very beginning, but it takes months for you to achieve any kind of parity with AI, unless you actually fight a lot of those horrible early game battles where you're vastly outmatched. That's the problem, because of the reputation resource. So the reputation, like, if you can fight, this is what breaks the game. If you fight a lot of battles, if you win a lot of battles, then you get a lot of reputation. The more battles you fight, the more territory you gain, the more objectives you complete as quickly as possible, the more reputation you have. You can use reputation to do a project weekly that's going to give you a lot of officers. So the way to overcome a lot of the issues in this game is fight a lot of battles, take territory. That will, like, taking territory alone, you look at this territory, you look, and it's going to produce income. That's what is actually important over here. Like, you take territory because it produces income. Like over here, it gives you a population, it gives you a recruitment base. That's what the incentive structure of the game is, to capture as much territory as quickly as possible, but at the same time you're screwed over in every way that actually matters in terms of doing so. You just don't have the resource. So it creates an awful campaign dynamic where, how do you win? How do you win a campaign? You don't do what I did in this campaign. You don't ignore Boston. because it's gonna, like, you have to take Boston. If you can't take Boston early on in the campaign, that campaign is 10 times more painful. So much for the Siege of Boston, basically. Which historically made sense for the Patriots to engage in that. There was no rush for the Patriots, historically speaking. That they didn't have a reputation system. Like, Washington wasn't going to lose his post and not research guns because he didn't have enough reputation from not seizing Boston. He wasn't going to run out of money because he wasn't completing enough objectives. But you will in this campaign. That's where the problem comes into play, really. And if you leave the bridge there, you're leaving them a foothold that they will use against you. And, yeah, problems abound. Problems abound. Because of that. So, it may not seem individually, and I'm pretty sure that developers are saying, oh, well, you know, the units are not so horribly behind the stats, right? That's fine. No, but when you combine it, like when you give the AI artillery, when you give the AI so many advantages, and you add it all up, yeah, it actually is significant. Like, maybe this doesn't seem too bad of a situation, but this is a battle that I'm not going to win so easily. Like, I'll have to cheese. Now, if I had, you know, if I had an even number of artillery, same quality, all that, that would be one thing. And eventually you can get to that point, but the journey there is such a miserable experience. Again, you don't have the resource. Hell, you don't even have the money to do it. Like, forget the reputation situation. You flat out don't have the money for it. Like, I understand that, like, things were precarious for the Patriots, but it's like, this is ridiculous. Like, what? Were the colonies dirt poor? No, they were not dirt poor. The militia, there were, you know how many militia were at Boston? 14,000. As opposed to this nonsense. Also, yeah, let's charge artillery. They might repel that charge. Okay. Now, it has been improved with the patch, so, and they do seem to have put people in charge that actually understand that the dynamic that exists was awful. But, like, as long as the disadvantage remains as it has been. And also, another thing I want to point out, that friendly fire aspect that's gonna, like, here's the thing. One of the best things to do is mass your units against an enemy unit to engage in melee. You don't want to engage in prolonged firefight. There's other reasons as well, like you actually lose more officers. Again, main bottleneck. You'll lose more officers in a prolonged range engagement than a melee engagement. Maybe that's one of the things that needs to be changed, by the way. Like, a campaign would be so much better if you weren't taking critical casualties like that from range engagements as you do right now. Like, that would make things easier to stomach. But the problem, oh jeez, the problem with yeah, and this battle's lost. Yeah, I know, crazy. They just annihilated me, simple as that. Also, why are they routing in that direction? Okay. But yeah, there's one particular behavior that's quite awful, and that's the friendly fire behavior. So, you know what's even worse than the fact that you engage in melee? That one of the better things to protect your officers, sub-officers, in a fight, you have to engage in a very one-sided melee fight that's against you. The fact that when you do so, your troops have a tendency of doing friendly fire against your own units engaged in melee. That didn't happen in Gettysburg in Civil War. I would know, I played those games a lot, I engaged a lot in melee. Like, that dynamic, like, it's not mindless in melee, I wish to point out. It's like specific melee charges that you plan out in a certain way But the problem is, you end up in the situation like you charge multiple units against one, which you wanted to do in Civil War in Gettysburg anyway. But then some of those units break the charge and fire, and then they do friendly fire against your units. Friendly fire, yeah, real thing. Could we have our own troops not shooting us in the back? You don't want to. You can toggle. You can toggle whole fire, sure. And my artillery is doing absolutely nothing here. You can toggle hold fire, but it won't quite work. It won't quite work so well. In a battle. And is that so much for the mighty artillery? Also, you don't have supply wagons from the beginning, and they cost a lot of resources to produce, so it's like you're gonna have a lot of battles where you might run out of ammo. You do have supply wagons that naturally will get supply. Like, what are they? This is so busted. It's like they're not even firing at this point. I had to literally bring them point blank range to do some damage, and yeah, this battle is lost. So really frustrating campaign dynamic, campaign difficulty. We can also talk about like how many of these British troops have actually a lot more experience than your units, which is also important. So I don't know, like how you design campaign like this, the mythology of like maybe this game should be called the propaganda of the American Revolution from a British perspective. The British were Herculean supermen that fought the evil devils of the Americans. Really, that's how it feels here. Is that absurdity. I mean, I understand they're out of ammo, that's the reason they're so ineffective. Still. And funnily enough, the ratio here is not actually horrible, though I lost the battle. Despite having more troops. This game. GameLabs has had this issue in Civil War as well. I don't deny it, right? It's like, it's been a problem from the very beginning of their series. I understand it. Like, where the early game was pretty brutal. And it was pretty brutal in Gettysburg and Civil War as well. The early game has always defined these kind of games. Absolutely. Indisputably. The issue is right now the early game is early freaking broken, and if you overcome it, you dominate the rest of the campaign. If you don't overcome it, you get obliterated. You end up losing, because by the way, you know what's going to happen over here at the end of July? The rest of Canada is going to open up. You get too much stuff too early on with too little resources to tackle it. It's a very, very front-heavy campaign that's not properly balanced or designed for that. It's not giving you the tools. The tutorials in the game are also a mess. And let me tell you this, as someone who spends a lot of time on YouTube making, videos on the subject of how people should play the game, what's the best way to play a game, all that kind of stuff, I can tell you, the best way to play a campaign over here is to Zerg rush Providence, Newport, get your production, whatever limited production you have, take Middleborough, then cheese day out, then cheese out 1 regiment or 2 regiments out of Boston, because you can eliminate them, do it again, rinse, repeat, eventually take Boston, build up a lot of forces for the naval invasion, get a ton of reputation, get Benedict Arnold, send 2,000, 3,000 men to the west to deal with the forts one at a time. That's how you win a campaign here. It's an awful fucking experience. And it's even worse when they like they reacted to those kind of tactics by nerfing them. But you still want, that's still how you want to do it. Taking Boston is a significant amount of cash that you just can't ignore. You need it. Like if you had more inherent resources, if things weren't so lopsided, if things weren't actually so one-sided against you as a player, it would be one thing. And there's Canada. The map won't expand for another year after this point, but oh, a year of this. Holy cow. Yeah. I guess the one thing you can say about AI is it's certainly not going to be passive in a campaign. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.